a plan and a purpose for my life that's about more than just me. From grief to purpose. No, I am not my pain, and I'm telling you my journey of healing is gonna take me from grief to purpose. Turning my pain into purpose. From grief to purpose. Turning all my pain into purpose. From grief to purpose.
Hey friends, welcome back to From Grief to Purpose podcast. Today, I am so thrilled to have with me a best-selling author, a coach, a speaker, and a fellow podcaster. And her name is Debbie Weiss. Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did. Good
Okay.
job.
I'm so excited. Listen, you definitely have one of those stories where, you face some things within your life. And I'm definitely, again, excited to have you on here just to share your story and then to also, allow our audience to gain some insight, some wisdom, whatever it is that you want to share. But I want to start, with what you had mentioned, in our speaking before and in my did a little research on you as well. But I want you to share. I want to start with what you described that turned out to be one of your many, or what would have been, or what will be, would become like many of your caregiving roles. And you shared that your life changed the day you graduated from high school when your father had a massive stroke. And you became his primary caregiver. Can you share a bit more about how stepping into that role shaped your life and how it affected your own well-being over time?
Sure. So, the day after high school, my dad had a massive stroke. He was only 45, almost 46. Thankfully, he survived, but he did become permanently disabled. And, growing up, I was always daddy's little girl. I have a younger brother who's 4 years younger. And my father was the apple of my eye. And honestly, it always felt like we were a family divided. At least this is what I felt like to me. My brother, I guess, when I asked him as we're older, didn't feel this way. But it was kind of like my dad and I and my mom and my brother. I don't know why. It's not like I don't have a good relationship with my mom, but, teenage girls and mothers, not the best. Maybe that was it. And so when he kind of like fell in a way, I was devastated. It felt like everything was spinning out of, your whole life is just turned upside down. And this person who you consider your rock is no longer your rock, even though he's still alive. And my parents had been separated a couple of years before, and it was evident after this happened. My mother was only 39 years old, and I think she was taking stock of her life, and is this what she wanted for the rest of her life, and decided that they would separate and divorce. She did take care of him until, there was a possibility or a place for her to move him to. But that caused me to step into the role of his primary caregiver. And so it changed my whole college experience. But what it really did was, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it almost made me start to gain some confidence, because as a girl, I lacked self-esteem, self-confidence. I've always had a weight problem. It was always, oh, look at her. She has such a pretty face. What a shame, kind of thing. And so I never wanted to be seen. I didn't speak up. With my friends and family, I was always loud and boisterous, but not with strangers. And then I had to be there for my dad. So it forced me to literally find my voice. Because I was not going to let my insecurities affect him by not advocating on his behalf. And, it changed everything about my life. I mean, in my 20s, I was learning about, well, one, kind of about divorce and all that entailed and all the financial stuff around it. And I was learning what Social Security was and Medicare and, disability insurance, like all of these things that most 22-year-olds don't need to know about.
Right.
So it kind of set the stage for the rest of my life. And I'm happy to say that my dad did survive for 30 years.
Oh.
So for 30 years, I was his caregiver, and how I felt about it did change over time. It did become difficult for me.
Now, can you go back just a little bit and share on how did it change you? You were in your 20s for the majority of that time, or at what age? I know you said you were at the teenage point, so there was some of high school, maybe some of college. In what ways did that change you as a young woman? And maybe did it have an effect on you, the fact that your parents were going through a divorce, as far as relationships as well too? Or were you just solely focused on just caring for your dad and you didn't really care about much of, your own personal social life?
Yeah, so I was 17 when he had the stroke.
Okay.
And I was set to go off to college at the end of the summer. This was the end of June that he had the stroke. And I had a serious boyfriend at the time. He and I weren't going to the same school. And when it came down to it, after 2 months of, my dad had been in the hospital really for 2 months. And after being there for him day after day, and my boyfriend too, he was amazing with my father. And so we were always, my mom was there. It wasn't an immediate thing that my mother just, kicked him out or something like that. She was there, but she was not, I didn't feel that she was as loving and caring as she could or should have been. That was my opinion. So I felt like that was my place to do the extra. And I didn't want to go away. At the end of that summer, I thought, well, how am I leaving him? Who is he going to have that, extra love and support? But my mother insisted. And my boyfriend and I went away. We were 3 hours apart, and, he was my rock. And I was, it was just such a horrible time. I could not get acclimated to college because my head and my heart were either with my boyfriend or with my father. And my father had some experimental brain surgery to try and reconnect the blood flow in his brain in October, and my mom wouldn't let me come home. And I was devastated. And she finally allowed me to come home for the weekend. My boyfriend drives 3 hours in one direction to pick me up. Then we go 6 hours the other direction to get to, back home to the hospital. And in a moment where I know my father never would have said this if he were in his right mind, but he said to me, I want you to come home. And I just thought, I've got to do this. I want to come home. I somehow have to convince my mother. And it took a lot of convincing, and it took the help of other people talking to her. And now in hindsight, I understand completely what my mother's perspective was. I didn't understand it then, but, she didn't want my life altered because of this. She didn't want me to miss out on the college experience. I was not going to drop out of college. I was going to come home, transfer to a local university that I would just commute to so that I could be there to take care of my dad. And so eventually, with a lot of pressure, she did give in. And so I did lose that experience. I came home. My boyfriend also came home. And, after about a year and a half, I realized, oh boy, this is kind of my only chance to have this college experience. Do I really want to let it go? And I wound up transferring to yet a third university as a junior and senior where I graduated from. And so my dad lived at home my boyfriend never went back away. My boyfriend actually lived in my house while I was away and took care of my dad.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was pretty
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad you had that support. You sound as if back then even you had that natural caregiver you know, thing within you, even though it was your parents. I think it's like, especially if you've had a close connection with your father, you want to naturally be there for them. I can only imagine though how hard it was just to keep up with your academics though, and still have your mind, wrapped around the concern of what's going on with your dad. So, that can be hard.
Yes.
Very challenging. I've been there myself. So, and now, if after that portion of your life transitioning, and I don't know, is this the boyfriend? Is this the boyfriend? 'Cause I know you said you were married. Okay, it's not. He didn't turn to the husband. Okay.
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
it was a big disappointment actually after I graduated from college and I came home. And my mom had to place my father in an independent living facility about an hour and a half away from where we lived, because back then, this was like 1985. Back
Mhm.
then, these kind of facilities were the exception, not the norm, as luckily they are today. And so he was pretty far from me. The only saving grace was that my aunt, his sister, lived close to there. So at least he had someone local in the case of an emergency who could be there in a minute. But after I graduated from college, my boyfriend, he said no, but I think he cheated on me and he left me for someone else. And it
Oh
was a
no.
very devastating time. Yes.
Oh, he missed out.
Well, thank
He
you.
missed out, and maybe Mr. Right. I mean, maybe it was meant to be because how they say like you know
Absolutely.
the right one came along. And speaking of the right one, the many other journeys you faced in your life, being that you've been kind of life placed you in this caregiver role. Can you share about just some of the other roles of caregiving that you've had to face within your own personal journey with your family members?
Absolutely. So when my oldest son was 2, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum.
Mm.
And, as a parent, you're a natural caregiver, right? That's our job. But having 2 sons, one who does not have special needs and having the other with special needs, it is a completely different experience. And so as soon, or really before my son got that diagnosis, I just went into like mama bear mode. What do I need to do to, I knew there was no cure, but what can I do to kind of, advance him, help him advance to catch up to his peers. And my life just became dedicated. My life in every way, financially, emotionally, time-wise, just dedicated to what can I do? What can I do? Especially at that very young age, I kind of had inside me like this deadline. I felt like, when the brain is so malleable, I've got to get it all in there.
Get all in there.
Yeah, get it all in there. So it was an extremely stressful time because I still had my dad.
Oh, wow.
My dad died when my oldest son was 10.
Oh,
And so I was still taking care of him. My sons are 21 months apart, so I had just had my younger son.
wow.
And I do also run an insurance agency. So I was pretty
Wow.
busy.
You were extremely busy. How did you manage? Like, how did you mentally manage where most, I mean, even if you're, whether you're a working mom or a stay-at-home mom, I don't have any children myself, but I have siblings that do. And it's a hard job. Like, it is a hard job, to, be able to manage. How did you mentally manage, especially having a son that's on the spectrum? So my brother, and I shared before, he has some mental health issues he deals with. And that can be challenging, but I can only imagine, like, as a child, you're a mom, you're a businesswoman, you're a wife, you have all these hats on. Like,
Oh,
how
yeah.
did you not lose it?
I think I was just, I've noticed I go through this I don't know, different cycles in my life. And so I was so clearly focused on my son at that time
Okay.
that it was just almost like adrenaline took over for a couple of years. But then there's always the crash and burn, right?
Okay.
You know, so either I would be holding it together, and then I was always on the brink. So, you know, it could be the one dumb thing that my husband said to me that he would say to me every other day. And that particular day, I would just freak out and be screaming and crying. And he's like, what the heck happened? Because I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't taking care of my emotional self, my physical self. And it was showing. You know, I had no patience with my father. None. You know, I look back now, of course, with so much regret, as even though I was there for him, that loving daughter that I just described when I was 17 and 25 was gone. I was annoyed. I felt burdened. I didn't know which way to turn first. And it was honestly, it was like being in a pressure cooker.
Oh, wow. So in other words, you were a real person. Like,
Yes. Yes. I was not showing up with a smile and having no stress. It was just the opposite.
like, hi, everything's okay.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
You know, because that's the thing, you know, it's, you know, you're a very successful woman. And sometimes people can see success and then they think like, oh, she just must have it all together every day, 24/7. Her life has been perfect. She sailed through everything with a breeze. So I love to always hear when people share, you know, like, no, I, you know, had a moment, like, you know, it's stress. I was stressed out, you know, so because you're human, we're human beings. So how can
Exactly.
you not, you know?
Exactly. I was like, yeah, I was, it was terrible what I was doing to myself. Really, it took me many, many years to realize that I had to prioritize my own self-care. I thought, as I think many women do, that that's being selfish. But really, it was once I started to do that, then at least I showed up as a better person to my father, you know, as a better mom, as all these things. Because otherwise, like I said, I definitely had zero patience, could really be snippy. And, you know, I started having physical manifestations, like my eye was twitching, my heart was palpitating, and I didn't know what it was. So, you know, definitely not perfect.
Listen, so you mentioned self-care because I know people have, you know, many different opinions about self-care and what it should be, what you shouldn't, you know, what it shouldn't be or whatever. Is it a thing? Is it not a thing? My opinion is, you know, I agree with self-care. You know, the opinions of other people, you know, as it relates to you, the individual, and you wanting to do self-care or not, or is it a selfish thing? I don't think that it is. But can you share a little bit about how, you know, what for you did you do for self-care during those tough times, during the seasons where you know, you're got all these hats on. So how did you prioritize self-care for yourself?
So, first of all, I learned that there are so many different forms of self-care. It doesn't mean getting a massage and a manicure and all those things. It can mean that, but it's so, so much more than that. For me, I always knew that exercise, and not just any form of exercise, like I don't like maybe some kind of traditional classes, but I've always loved to dance. So I made it a priority. For me at the time was jazzercise, and I began to set boundaries with my family as my kids got a little older, you know, school age and stuff. And it was like, I am going to jazzercise, you know, whatever it was, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, this time to this time. For that hour and a half that I'm gone, well, I don't know if they could call me then. I don't think they could. I don't think we had cell phones yet. But, you know, don't bother me. Don't bother me. Don't think I'm not going to go. Whatever you need help with, a problem with, it will wait until I get back.
Oh, wow.
And obviously, you know, any exercise is great for you physically, but more so for me, mentally. It was so important because I would walk into that class and I'd have like all of my thoughts and worries and everything just like scrolling in my head. And then the music would start. And that was it. I'd start singing. I'd start paying attention to how my feet are supposed to move. And by the time I walked out, it was like I had, just taken this incredible exhale and then could show up as a much better person. So that's where I started, and then, started branching out and incorporating other things.
Wow, nice. Because it's such a much needed, like you said, exhale of like the day. I'm learning even more to schedule time. Even if I'm not doing anything, if I say 15 minutes on my calendar, because most people have calendars, if you're running off of that, and even if you're not like, in some form of like calendaring your day to where you're that, if you're busy, you still need to take time, I feel, for yourself, where it's 5 minutes, you should have 10 minutes. And like you said, tell your household,
Yep.
do not bother me, leave me alone during this time, because you do need to refresh, get re-energized, and so forth. Now I'm gonna let me go to my questions that I have written down here, because if I don't go to my questions, I will have you here all day, Debbie, just like ranting on different topics.
Go right ahead.
Because again, I'm so excited to have you here. But I have the gift of gab, so I'll have us talking about, way off center from our questions and what I really wanted to ask. So now with the caregiver role, you being a caregiver for so long, and the many different things that you faced in being a caregiver, which is a very selfless act, might I add, because you didn't have to do, what you did. Because a lot of people, including our family members, you don't step up, and sometimes you find yourself being the one that's like, I'll do it. Like I guess it's me. Tag, I'm it. But how did you manage again to balance those demands of caregiving while giving your own personal growth and pursuing your own dreams? Because, I know you still had, things that you wanted to do. Did you ever have those moments where you feel like, well, I guess I'm not going to get that accomplished, and I guess this is all that I'm going to be, and just be content? How did you battle those transitions in life?
Oh my gosh, this is completely who I was. I was like, well, this is it. This is my life. And it's not like I had so much to complain about, right? I had a good job and a nice house and, all the things on paper. But was I feeling satisfied, fulfilled, all those things? 1,000% no. Did I have any idea what I would need to do to feel those things? No idea. I had no dream to be an artist or I got nothing. But I just felt like, I guess this is it. I mean, not that I was giving up, but I wasn't searching for anything more. And then when I turned 50, for me, 50 was like a big number and a time that it really made me reflect and realize, one, how did I get here, right? Like 50, how could I be 50? And really think to myself how quickly life has gone. And I saw, my dad actually had passed away about a year before I turned 50. So he lived with a lot of regrets. I feel like my mother lives with a lot of regrets. I don't want to be that person. But what does that mean? What do I do? Because I didn't know what it was. And so at 50, it's kind of when I started to turn inward and explore, who I was. And is there anything else out there for me? I don't know what it is. I don't know how to find it. But if I don't start trying, then I'll never find it. So I might as well begin the search. So 50 for me was definitely, I would say, one of the most pivotal years of my life.
Wow. They say as you get older, now I'm 45, but I always gleam towards older women because, older women make me feel, like that's going to happen when I turn like 50, like, that's going to happen when I turn 60. Like they, the pinnacle was in hearing like, well, when you hit your 40s, it's going to be another life transition, and it's going to be amazing and all these things. And I will say I have more clarity, now. So
Yes.
I'm excited about 50. I'm pulling from you. I'm excited about my 50s now. It's a different day too for, women as a whole. So I'm excited. I'm gonna pull from your energy. So like I can't look. I'm looking forward to it.
It
So
is all good.
I love it. Now, as in I want to go back just a bit. Now I know that you also mentioned, as we spoke before, that you had to deal with not, I know your son, but your husband also passed away.
Yep.
And how was that whole transition? Like how was the transition? Like, how do you face like not tragedy, but I guess it's tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. Like mentally, how are you able to gut through all of that?
So I'll backtrack a little as well. And you were saying that your brother struggled with mental illness. So did my husband, and so does my son, who I'm not sure later on they kind of removed that spectrum diagnosis, but he does suffer from mental illness. He suffers from depression. He suffers from anxiety. So does my husband. My son really had a volatile time in his late teens. He's almost 24 now. That was for sure the most stressful period of my life and affected our whole family greatly. And my husband and my son, they were almost, when people are too similar and they're always like, batting heads and they don't see it. And that's kind of what their relationship was. And I didn't realize at the time that my husband was really suffering from depression. And my husband and I actually worked together. And we each had separate roles. It took us a long time to figure out how to work together. Let me tell you, it was not easy. But once we got it down, it was like, okay, you go to your corner, I'll go to my corner, you do your thing, I do my thing, So, and it actually was great because we were able to kind of like job share when the kids were younger and someone was always home with them. But anyhow, one day, my husband walked out of the office and said, I'm never coming back to the office.
Okay.
And he left me. He left us, my team member who's been with me now almost 27 years, stacks of papers, because he also has ADHD, just like the rest of my family members. Stacks of papers like, this high, over his head. And I said, well, Gary, let me just bring the papers home and you tell me what to do with these papers. Like, who do I call? What do I do? And he was like, nope, can't do it. So
he was done.
He was done with a capital D. Done.
Okay.
And he was kind of, we had traditional role reversal. He was the chef. He did the grocery shopping. He was all about that stuff. I was the person who opened up the cabinet, looked inside and said, we don't have any peanut butter. And he said, well, why don't you just move that and then you'll find it? Like I knew nothing that was in my house. And I was more the money person and more of a business person than he was. Okay. And so I thought to myself, because he had kind of started really slacking on the cooking and shopping. And I thought, well, he'll go back to that. And he never went back to that. And he really started to take a downhill turn. He always had health problems. But his mental illness got more and more severe. And eventually he was hospitalized for depression, came out with definitely a newer lease on life. And I think we all felt really positive. And 6 weeks later, out of the blue, he was diagnosed with terminal blood cancer. And it was so cruel because we all felt like maybe we had, Gary back. He was coming back. And to punch, kick him when you're, he was finally up. We were finally hopeful. And this came out of the blue. Wow. And I actually, is my last caregiving role thus far in my life. I basically stopped working and cared for him. He lived about 6 months from the day that he was diagnosed. And it was an awful time, not just with the cancer, but more so with the mental illness. It was very, very, very difficult.
Whoa.
And, so many times with him, I felt like I learned to grieve someone, feel that grief when they're still alive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then thinking that you're prepared for when they pass, and realizing the second that he did that I wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
And I wanted him back. I didn't want him back the way he was, but I wanted him back the other way. And that was 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. And you all were married, you mentioned how long again?
We were married almost 30 years.
30 years. Wow. Ooh. So sorry to
Thank you.
hear that. Because when your loved one passed, that can be extremely hard, especially someone you've been around or lived with for a long time. I was sharing with one of my family members, like I think they had mentioned when I had posted something about my own personal situation. They were like, well, how come you didn't tell me what you were going through? And I was like, well, we all were going through it. I was just going through it in the form of a daughter. I said, but if you've known her longer than me, because she was, she had a life way before me. So you may have been going through it, as a sister or as a, so each of our grief is a little bit different. So I didn't, but you shared like just the anticipation, that anticipatory grief that you're preparing yourself for it. But, when your husband passed away, you felt that, like, I am not ready for this. Like, how did you, for those that have gone through the loss of a spouse, like, what were those things that you did to, self-heal or to make sure that you were mourning properly to kind of get through those painful moments? What were you doing?
This is going to sound so crazy, but my first book, I actually wrote while he was dying.
Oh, wow.
And I've never had, the whole writing thing is a whole story, but I'm not a writer. I never had any desire to write a book. I'm not going to talk about how it happened. We'll be here for another hour. But I almost didn't do it. I did it through taking a course. And at the time when my husband was diagnosed, I was speaking to a therapist. And I said, well, I'm not going to start this writing thing now. I mean, my goodness, Gary was just diagnosed. And she said, no, I disagree with you. This is the perfect time. This is the perfect time to start something new, something different that you can focus on outside of what's going on with him and the rest of your life that's spinning out of control. And she was right, because no matter what was going on at home, if he was in the hospital, I brought my computer. It looked like I was moving in every day. I came in with so much stuff into his hospital room. I would write when he was sleeping. I would, when he was doing tests, whatever, at home when he was napping. And in answer to your question, because I had done that when he died, I was 2 or 3 chapters shy of finishing. And afterwards, I was supposed to have it to the editor like 2 weeks after he died. And of course, they said to me, don't be ridiculous, we'll extend the due date, blah, blah, blah. And after the funeral was over, and, as anyone who's lost a loved one, and I remember so clearly too with my dad, everyone else goes back to their life and you're left there to deal with it by yourself. And that is when it's hard. You think it's hard during the whole funeral, mourning, whatever. No, that's easy because people are there to distract you, and that's the whole reason for it. And they leave and they think it's over, and it's really just beginning. And what I found after that first week is that I thought to myself, I can sit here and just wallow. And I did certainly wallow. It's not like I didn't let myself feel the grief. Don't get me wrong. It's just like, oh, I was so, I wasn't smiling, caring for others, and I wasn't smiling, moving on. I was, feeling it. But I did also try to have those moments or schedule those times to focus on something, that made me, excited. And so I did. I finished it. I wrote those final 2 or 3 chapters and I handed it in to my editor. And then after the editor, there was all different kinds of processes and it was all new to me. So I didn't know anything about it. But that kind of was exciting. That was exciting. My book. So my husband passed away December 30th, 2022. I handed it in January 15th, 23. And I had a book launch date of August 9th. And so for those months, it gave me something different to focus on. At the same time, I had a friend who insisted that I learn to try to knit, even though I'm the least crafty person that ever existed. But I found that there was something a little soothing about it. Not that I knit anything great. I couldn't even care, if I just kept knitting and I made nothing. The whole point is I allowed myself to start to explore a little bit about myself. It was okay. I was still having those moments and still have those moments where out of the blue, something I hear or, reminds me and I'm hysterical crying. But I'm not hysterical crying all day, So I think that realizing it's okay to grow and learn even in these moments of intense grief is okay. And I actually found it very therapeutic and did continue to give me something different to focus on.
Wow. Thank you for mentioning therapy, first of all, because therapy is important.
Absolutely.
I have my own faith, my own spirituality, but also, I'm an advocate for therapy, take care of your mental health, go talk to someone. Because it's just that person, whether it's a coach or a therapist, counselor, they're there because it's important to talk to that person that's stable, that has the professional tools, to guide you. I'm always saying, you don't want to talk to someone if you're spiraling out of control. You don't want to talk to somebody else that's spiraling out of control too.
Yeah,
True. It's going. You're not going. It's healthy. So I'm glad you mentioned that and you had that available to you to do that. And her mentioning writing, because it's that journaling. I'm sure I don't know if your goal was I'm gonna write this book and I'm gonna be able to help millions of people and. But it was about the journaling parts to get it out, because that can be therapeutic, as well. But I know you mentioned earlier, just to shift a little bit, from when you said your 50s, was that kind of moment for you in life? So as you, was that something though, also when your husband's passed away, you find yourself in this position now of, you're a widower and you're facing still grieving, I'm sure, still mourning, but you still found that you have life within you, you got to keep going, because you have choices as well. We've all been there. If you haven't lost anyone in life yet, we're all gonna face that moment in time where we lose somebody, but you do have a choice. You have a choice to either stay in bed all day in the dark with the pillows and the covers, for months on end and years on end, where you're just not really here, you're going to work, coming home, and that's it. Or like you said, get up, write the book, start knitting, do something. Was your 50s that defining moment for you when you did decide to prioritize yourself a little bit more and you made the shift then to start also now, okay, let me investigate those creative things and start living my best life? What was that shift for you, if it wasn't, or when did that happen?
It was really a slow process, I have to say. After I turned 50, I knew that the one thing I had to do, regardless of, any of the other things, was that I did have to get control of my weight. At that point, I was 100 pounds overweight, maybe a little more. And like I said, I've struggled my whole life, so it wasn't anything new to me. I'd been up, down, and all around. And I approached my weight loss different than I had in the past. And I didn't even realize that there was a name for it. I didn't know what I was doing. I don't know what made me do this, but I'd always been a perfectionist. Either you're on the diet, you're off the diet. The food is good, the food is bad, like that kind of thing. And I have to lose, 20 pounds in 2 weeks and, all things that are unrealistic. And so I just really shifted my mindset to there's no end game. I'm never going to be off this thing. It's, not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And that mindset shift set me up for success because it didn't matter if it took me a year or 5 years to lose 100 pounds because I wasn't going off of this.
Wow.
And so it did. It took me about 3 years to lose 90 pounds. That was probably about 8 years ago. And, I've gone up and down. I'm not going to lie. 10, once, almost 15 pounds, but I caught it. And it's the first time in my life I've ever been able to do that. And the only thing that changed is my mindset and how I was approaching, the whole weight loss thing. And so I think then I thought to myself, well, that worked for that. What else could that, how else could that work in my favor? And so my journey really started then by listening to podcasts, which is so interesting and so cool, and why I really have such a passion for it, because I had a friend who it was at the time where podcasts weren't as well known as they are today. And I had one friend who listened, and I'm like, who are you listening to? Are you listening to famous people? Are you who are these people? They're strangers, they're everyday people. Well, what do you know? Who do I don't get it. But then when I started exploring and listening, and I thought, this is amazing. And to be able to listen to people who've walked the walk, they're not necessarily famous. They just like you're doing, they just want to share their experience to try and help someone else. That's it. I, gravitated actually towards a woman who had also lost a lot of weight, and she had some money problems, which I did. And so I related to her. And she was really all about mindset. And I had never heard the term and I didn't know anything about it. So that was about in my mid-50s. And I just have kept exploring. I've been more open-minded. I have just tried things that I never thought I would try before. And I am so risk averse and so afraid of failing or looking dumb or any of those things that I never put myself out there. Knitting, no way. Being on a podcast, all of these things that I'm doing now, the writing, speaking, I was petrified to speak in public. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even. And now, I get scared, but once I get started, then, I'm good and I'm glad I'm there. So it really has just been incremental steps over time, and each thing has led somehow to another thing. And and this is not a shameless plug, even though it's going to sound like it. My first book that I wrote was my memoir called On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. Because I was always, anytime any opportunity or idea came up, I was like, no, I don't do that. I don't knit. I don't ski. I had all the answers. But what I realized was that once the way my life started changing was when I took a breath after that initial no came in and said, wait a minute, on second thought, maybe I can try this. Who said I can't do that? I won't know until I try. It's with that attitude that really has changed the trajectory of my life. And I have to say, I'm not, just like what I was saying before, I don't always go, oh no, once thought maybe I can, My friends throw it in my face sometimes when I say no, and they're like, hello, on second thought. I'm like, okay, I'll try it.
Well, first of all, congratulations on losing 90 pounds.
Thank
I'm pretty
you.
sure it's probably over 90 pounds by this point. But that is, something to be proud of, because it's hard work, to do that and to be, get yourself that disciplined. And then, you're right, the mind shift you definitely have to change your thoughts, versus if you were that type of person where you felt like, I don't think I can, or I don't, feel like it, or, those negative thoughts will take you to places versus you retraining, your, thought speech, I'll call it, I can do this. You might have to work yourself up, like you said, those steps that you take to get there. And once you get started, like you mentioned, I'm good. I'm the same way. Like once I start something, before I even try to talk myself out of it, I
Yes.
know once I start, I'm going to be fine. Everyone I think gets those little nerves or those little, second guesses about themselves. But, you mentioned that, like once you got started with a thing, you were, selling. So, in the last part, now you mentioned your book that leads me to my next question. Actually, I was going to ask too. So, in that memoir, on second thought, maybe, you talk about overcoming those limiting beliefs. For you, what was the biggest belief you had that challenged you, and how did you find the courage to confront it?
Oh, gosh. I
like that.
guess, yeah. Oh, I think probably I'm not worthy
Mm.
because I always felt less than and not good enough because of the way I looked. And it was a message I got loud and clear from the time I was born.
Mm.
And I'm sure that losing the 90 pounds certainly helped me gain that confidence and overcome or begin to overcome that limiting belief. But it's a journey. It's a journey. And there's many things, especially now stepping into some different roles and things that I'm unfamiliar with. I have that imposter syndrome, like, who am I to write a book? Who am I to tell people this? I'm not Oprah. I'm not, who's going to listen to me? I still battle that.
Mm.
But, like you said, in your 50s, you start to realize, who cares? I don't care what they think. I don't care that I'm on video and not wearing makeup. I mean, I am right now. But if you look on social media, most of my videos, I'm not wearing makeup. I don't care what you think of me. This is what I look like. You don't like it? Don't watch.
Yes.
And that is what you gain as you get older, for sure. And I'm 61 now, so I don't know. I'll let you know in a few years what my 60s are about. But right now, it's a continuation. It really is.
Yes. 61 and looking good, by the way.
Thank you.
I have to, like it's always Glee, like my aunt is, my aunts and uncles, and they're always like, even though I'm 45, they're always like, oh, you're still a baby. I'm like, oh, like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm over here thinking I'm all old. Like, no, ma'am. Like, you got a little living to do still. So I love
That's
that,
right.
when you're saying, I'll let you, when I finish my 60s, I will let you know, because we all have life to live. And, that human experience, though, going back to, what we have to learn from one another, we are human. So, what I may not know, I can learn it from, you, Debbie, or, someone else. That's why I love sharing, and getting to share the journeys of others. Because sometimes it'll make you kind of take a look at your own life and be like, what?
Exactly.
If they got through that, then I definitely can get through this. So if you wouldn't mind too, can you share us a little bit more about what your first book was about? On second thought, maybe I can.
So it's about 30 different stories of my life, and it's divided into 3 parts. The first part is my childhood and really stories about how I developed all these limiting beliefs. And then the middle part is about a lot of different struggles that I faced besides the ones that we've talked about. And then the last part is what has happened since I turned 50. And how my life has changed, and some stories of that evolution.
Now also now for your books, I know because you're the author of 2 books, correct?
Correct.
So far. And they can be found at her listed website here on the screen, which will be also in the description for you all to go and visit that. But definitely check out those books. Now, as a coach, Debbie, you I know you empower with what you do. You empower women to harness their inner strength and take control of their lives. What advice would you give to someone feeling stuck, unsure, if they can take the first step, or what's like the best advice also that you've given someone, however you want to answer. But sometimes we get stuck, we're human. We
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like, I don't, am I, like you mentioned before, I guess this is it. Like,
Exactly.
like what advice would you give to someone feeling stuck, unsure if they can take that first step or not?
So I think the thing that was my biggest revelation was that I was not taking responsibility for my life. I thought I was, and I could tell you all these things that happened to me that I had no control over. So, what am I supposed to do? And then I realized through a lot of, this work that no, even though these things happen to us that are uncontrollable, it is up to me to decide how I respond. It is up to me to decide what the next steps are. And so if you're sitting there thinking that you're stuck, you're stuck. If you're sitting there thinking, well, maybe I can do something, it's all about really, it's a quote from like Henry Ford, and it's something like, if you think you can't, you can't. If you think you can't, you can't. And if you think you will, you can. It's like whatever you believe, that's the truth. And why not open yourself up to a little possibility? And I think the hardest thing is that when you think to yourself some big dream that seems so ridiculous that you just say, well, forget it. Obviously, I can't do that. It's too much. You've got to break it down into something smaller. And it's just like anything, those little teeny steps. So what is it? What is it for you? Is it a hobby that you didn't pursue that you want to? Is it a career goal? Is it a health goal? Whatever that goal is, figure out what's one teeny weeny small thing that I can do today that's going to move me in that direction. And then once you do that, maybe it's a health goal and you say, all right, I drink no water, but I want to drink 8 glasses of water today, a day. Well, drink a half a cup of water today. Don't say I'm going to drink 8 glasses if you drink none, and those little steps, you feel good when you achieve what you set out to achieve. Even if they seem like ridiculous and not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
They do. They eventually get you somewhere. And you can do it. And when you start to realize that and you take that small step and you start to feel proud of yourself and you take another one tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And if you don't take it on the 5th day, you say, okay, that's all right. What am I going to do next?
I love that. Again, just those small steps or something, it's something, at least you did that something, versus talking about what you're going to do.
Yes.
Like you said, making it so grand that you can't even reach, the ability to do it because you kind of psych yourself out about it. It's like what I hear you say is like, well, I'm going to, if you're not a runner, I'm going to run 8 miles today. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so that was, I love that, that advice that you gave. Now you have 2 books, and mention the other one too. We see it in the back, the Sprinkle Effect. What is that book about?
So after I wrote the first book, everyone's like, okay, this is great. I'm inspired. What did you do? The first book is just inspirational. The second book is little things that you can sprinkle into your life to start to change your life. And so in the book, The Sprinkle Effect, there are 15 different sprinkles, like a sprinkle of mindset, a sprinkle of belief, of courage, of action, of joy and connectivity, all different sprinkles that, you know, that's what it's about, just sprinkling in little things. And again, I envision, and you see on the cover of my book, here it is, I envision, rainbow sprinkles, because I love rainbow sprinkles and I love ice cream with rainbow sprinkles. And if you think about, to me, I visualize like plain vanilla or chocolate ice cream, boring, and then you put all these colorful things on it and like everything changes, right?
Oh.
And so if you just sprinkle in these little things into your life one by one sprinkle at a time, you can really start to change your life. And so the book is, the 15 sprinkles, which still has a little story and a little explanation. But at the end of each chapter, I have actionable steps for you to take, activities, journal prompts, like you gotta work it. Like you said, you can't just think it. You can't just read it. You can't just listen to it. You got to do it.
Yes.
And that is really, I must say that over and over again, I'm like a nag in the book, because I know for myself, I would read it and, I'd be reading a book and have these activities, or it'd say, stop reading. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not stopping reading. I'll do that later, but you never do it later. And I would just go on, and it just then collected dust on the shelf, the book, after I was done, and I forgot what was even in there. So I also created, because I'm like a little school nerd, so I created a workbook to go with it so that you have one place to like answer all the questions. You don't have to do it in order.
Yeah.
And literally, if you do this, if you complete this workbook, I guarantee your life will look a lot different.
Oh, I love that. I love a good book with exercises and journaling activity, you guys.
Yep.
Listen, get that book. I love it. I'm definitely want to get it for myself. Like I said, I love a journal because I can sit there and just make it a part of my morning before I start the day. How you all do it, if you do your morning routine. For me, it's like that meditation time, exercise, and then but it just changes the day for me when I'm like starting it out right. So good journal prompts, and when you're saying this, the sprinkle part for me, when you mentioned that, I immediately thought of like, just, there's so much more to us, and discovering like what's in you, and like, you're not this person that's, well, this is it. Like, there's so much more to discover about yourself, and I feel like your book could definitely like help someone get there, walk you through those steps. Because sometimes you need a guide, you need like the on black and white, put it on paper so I can know like, how do I get to step A? Because I don't even know how to get to step A.
Exactly.
Yes. So I love that. I thank you, first of all, so much for joining me. You're very inspiring, Debbie, and your story just resonates with me, but a part of why I wanted to just, have you on is just because you sound like your story is one of those, like, I'm determined to make it, in life. Like, I'm determined. When I say make it, so for me, success, my goal is to get to those rocking chair goals. I'm talking about, if the good Lord allows me to see, I don't know, 100, then that's something for me, because it's like you've lived life, so many decades that you've seen, and, whatever your life entailed, marriage, children, work, whatever. But you just kept going because, people face different things, like, your father and, your husband, your son. But a lot of people, they go off the path and they can't get back on, and when I say go off the path, I mean, we turn to many different things, whether it's like you stayed in depression, you turn to alcohol, drugs, whatever it was that kind of, took you off the path. You got into a life of crime, whatever, but you stayed there is the thing. Not at the point that you went the opposite direction, but your story is just very inspiring to show other people, like, this is what I went through, these are the things that I endured, and you can do it too. There's life after, pain and that grief, which is the whole purpose, of this show, From Grief to Purpose, because, I don't want people to stay in their grief. We all go through it, but it's not fun, but again, thank you so much for being able to come and inspire other people and to share. So let the people know too, and I'm going to put it up here. Where can they follow you on your social media and all the good things?
Sure. So my website is DebbieRWeiss.com. You got to put in the R, otherwise you wind up with a realtor in California. And all my social links and everything, the book links and everything are on there. But on Instagram, it's Debbie.R.Weiss.
Nice. And then I also put they can follow you
TikTok,
on TikTok as well. Be sure you all to go and follow Debbie. Again, inspiring journey. Get her books and just especially the journal, prompts, logs, and things that you could do, because those daily things that you can daily book and tool that you can use to add your process, to it. And then as far as coaching on the website as well, you're coaching women, empowering them to be able to, with the coaching, go into a little bit more detail with that. Like, what is it that you...
Actually, I have to be honest, I'm not coaching anymore.
Not anymore? Did you retire, Debbie?
I didn't retire. I shifted.
Ooh.
I shifted because
Okay.
what I realized was that I feel like I could have more impact talking and sharing my story with more people at a time.
I love that. Nice. Well, listen, you have to know when it's time to shift.
Yeah.
And that's true. Because like now, you're reaching people, and you have to know when to shift, when to, stay. So even with that, life transitions, again, don't stay stuck.
That's it. And 2 years from now, who the heck knows?
Right. Just flow
Yep.
flow with life, where life takes you.
Exactly.
All right, you guys, thank you so much. Thank you again, Debbie. And you all, thank you for tuning in to From Grief to Purpose podcast. As always, if you have not joined our community and click that subscribe button, go right ahead and click it. Join us so that we can grow together and heal together. All right, you guys, till next time. Bye.